One of the things that is incredibly troubling in the United States of America is that the American population are beginning to realize that we have what amounts to be a three-tiered justice system. Now, oftentimes, people on the left will talk about a two-tiered justice system. If they're more racially minded, they'll say the evil white racists with their evil white racism set up a system to excuse evil white racism. However, if they're more class-oriented, they'll say the rich, the elites, and all that are able to escape consequences due to the fact that they have money to pay for lawyers and all that. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. However, there's also another class of criminal or another class of crime that we see consistently be treated completely different. Now, you could say this might be down to laws or whatever that have changed over time, but in reality, in actuality, that is not the case because a bunch of these crimes are committed within months of each other. They're politically motivated, they're riot related, yet we see time after time that people who were at the Capitol on January 6th get punished to the fullest extent of the law. By the way, some of those people do in fact deserve that. They did do rioting stuff at the Capitol, but a lot of them were trespassers that somehow got attached with that terrorism enhancements, while Black Lives Matter rioters tend to walk or get off scot-free, despite the fact that there's overwhelming evidence of their criminality. Well, a perfect example of this is what went down in Atlanta, Georgia. You guys might remember the Rashad Brooks case, where you have a black guy who is drunk out of his mind. He fell asleep in the Wendy's drive-thru. The police show up. He fights the cops. He takes a weapon from the cops, a taser, tries to fire it at a cop's head, gets shot for his trouble in the most justified shooting that you can possibly have. And then the very next day, Black Lives Matter rioters decided that the Wendy's was at fault because, they denied a black man his natural God-given right to drink and drive and fall asleep in their drive-thru, blocking off all the traffic, so they set that Wendy's on fire. Well, 2 of the 3 people that were arrested in connection with that Wendy's arson have taken plea deals, and when you hear the sentences that these people got, you are going to be shocked and horrified. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, thank you to the members, people who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
I really appreciate you. And of course, the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
And tonight in Atlanta, 2 people accused of burning down a Wendy's have accepted plea deals.
So first of all, this shot is actually pretty funny because it has the RIP Rashad spray painted on the back of the sign. So we have the crime of vandalism right there. And then you have the Wendy's on fire in the background, which just goes to show you that the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole is ridiculous and stupid and crazy in every possible way.
The Wendy's is where an Atlanta police officer shot and killed Rashad Brooks in 2020.
But the thing that you need to understand about this particular Wendy's fire and the suspects that are involved in this particular Wendy's fire is that this is not stupid protesters who got overly emotional about the completely justified shooting of Rashad Brooks and decided to burn down a fast food restaurant due to the fact that they had an uncontrollable emotional outburst due to the fact that they perceive evil white racism under every corner. And guess what Wendy's is? A ginger. And we all know that Black America wants to replace the gingers as told to us by Hollywood because every single redhead character weirdly gets replaced by a black person. And yes, it is weird that it's more common for redheads in particular to be replaced. That's actually not what was behind this. This wasn't just idiots setting Wendy's on fire for revenge like we've seen in other Black Lives Matter riots where they strike against the closest store or whatever. This was terrorism. Pure and simple. And one of the reasons why we know that this is terrorism is that one of the 3 suspects in this arson, the one that didn't get the plea deal, actually has a history of politically motivated violence and politically motivated arsons. And we're going to have to go into the suspects so that you can understand this for yourself. So the suspects in this particular instance are Chisholm Kingston, Natalie White, and John Wesley Wade, who were arrested on arson charges within weeks of the fire, which came in the midst of the protests for the Black Lives Matter riots, and were specifically tied to what happened to Rashad Brooks, because again, this was the Wendy's that he fell asleep in. Now, Kingston and White, as you just heard, pled guilty, and they were sentenced to 150 hours of community service at a nonprofit organization and a $500 fine, and 5 years of probation. Now, to be clear, this nonprofit organization that they could do community service at, wink wink, could be the local Black Lives Matter chapter, which is shameful and ridiculous. The $500 fine comes nowhere close to covering the damage of that Wendy's being burned down. And before you say they have insurance, before you say that's on Wendy's corporate, Wendy's franchises out its locations just like a bunch of fast food joints, so there is a better than not chance that some poor sad sack saved up all his money in order to get approved to run a business there, and unfortunately, because Rashad Brooks decided to fight a cop in the parking lot because he was drunk driving to the point where he fell asleep in that Wendy's parking lot and got himself shot, he ended up losing everything he worked for due to the fact that these terrorists deliberately targeted his place of business as retribution for something that was completely justified. Now, what you also need to understand is that Kingston and White were actually sentenced under Georgia's first offender law, meaning that if they complete their sentences without violating the terms of their probation or committing another crime, their records will be wiped clean. Now, Wade, who has not pled guilty and still has a case pending, is actually in federal prison in West Virginia after he pled guilty in February of 2022 to a charge of conspiracy to burn a U.S. Postal Service vehicle. And this is where things get incredibly interesting in my opinion, because John Wesley Wade turns out he is somebody who has committed this crime before, committed this crime repeatedly, and the only reason he wasn't able to receive the plea deal was due in large part to the fact that he already had to plead guilty to other crimes he committed as a BLM terrorist, and these charges were federal, so the Fulton County District Attorney's Office could not give him the same break that they got all these other people. But apparently, working with somebody with this pattern of behavior did not come into play. You had to give them the biggest sweetheart deal humanly possible, which is just community service, just a $500 fine.
Now, court records show the two suspects were sentenced to 5 years probation. They also have to pay a $500 fine and complete 150 hours of community service.
And the chance to have your record completely expunged if you follow the terms of your probation and you don't get arrested within that 5-year period. But the John Wesley Wade thing really goes to show you what the motivating factor was behind targeting these Wendy's, and that, of course, was political extremism, BLM extremism to be specific. Because John Wesley Wade not only targeted post office vehicles, he also repeatedly targeted law enforcement, and this was not his first rodeo, meaning this wasn't his first arson. So John Wesley Wade, Ellie, Melvin Britt, and Vita Jones, this was his crew of 3 for other crimes, not the same crew of 3 where 2 of 3 ended up pleading guilty, were arrested on federal charges in the early morning hours of October 7th. Investigators said the trio threw a brick at one of the patrol cars, which had a note with political rhetoric tied to it, and smashed the windows of that vehicle. Now, to be clear, writing that it had generic political rhetoric, ridiculous and absurd. We know for a fact that this was Black Lives Matter rhetoric. They were using the Black Lives Matter riots as a way to attack not only police, but businesses that they deemed guilty of evil white racism. So this is an intentionally misleading vagary, and I find it to be completely disgusting. The 3 suspects were also reportedly involved in setting that car and another vehicle on fire, investigators said, and the surveillance video helped identify the suspects, investigators said. In fact, these 3 were identified as being a part of 3 other burning incidents across metro Atlanta because this was their shtick. This is what they did. So yeah, let's get this straight for you guys out there in the audience. You have a ringleader in this instance. His name is John Wesley Wade. John Wesley Wade does political terrorism for Black Lives Matter causes, and he usually does it with 2 different accomplices. Now, in this particular instance, where he actually had to plead guilty and face federal prison time, he made the mistake of targeting the post office, and of course, when you target an institution of the federal government, then it's serious, so there were serious consequences for that. But it turns out in another attack that him and another 2 people operated on, which was on a Wendy's when it's being held by the Atlanta police when they have to make the determination on what they're going to do, his co-conspirators all of a sudden are able to completely escape responsibility. They're able to get 150 hours, a $500 fine, and by the way, the fact that they committed a vicious arson for terroristic reasons gets to be wiped completely clean from their record if they just complete the pitiful terms of their probation, the pitiful terms of their sentence. You have to essentially try to get this to stay on your record in order for us to have a record of it. This is the double-tiered justice system, or the 3-tiered justice system if you're counting the elite one or not, right here on display for you guys out there in the audience. Think about the sentences for trespassing at the Capitol, a public building. A lot of those people were waved in by police. That is not to excuse the nefarious actors in the crowd. And you compare it to setting a fire, to committing an arson. And you could argue maybe they want to get the conviction against John Wesley Wade, but he's already in federal prison. He already has been facing time, and it's unsurprising to anybody out there in the public that he would get another conviction for another arson that he was committing in and around the same time. So this was completely unnecessary. They had solid evidence against these individuals. They could have easily convicted them, yet they chose to give them a break. Yet they chose to go super soft. Yet they chose a sentence that's not really a punishment that also will be completely wiped for their record because, God forbid, we touch a little baby hair on a Black Lives Matter rioter's head. Now look, I want to know what you guys think out in the comments below. Do you think that this sentence of 150 hours of community service that could be served by working for the local Black Lives Matter Atlanta chapter is justice? Do you think that's fair? Do you think the $500 fine to the government covers the costs and the damages of the Wendy's fire? Do you think it even covers the payment for the firefighters to show up and put this thing out? Let me know down in the comments below what you think, if you think this is justice, if you think this is fair. Also, contrast this to other charges, to other sentences for other not left-wing activism, not left-wing political violence, not left-wing situations, and let me know if you think that's fair, or maybe we got a double standard here. Again, let me know all in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Black Lives Matter rioters getting a break. Till next time.